Hi everyone. I'm trying to make sure I can get everything in order. Just checking in to see if it's registering on your end. This is always tricky because I've got some tech instructions here that I am not entirely sure are working according to plan. So don't mind me. With any luck that we've got an administrator tuned in. One thing that I had hoped to do was to change the title of this to Poets in Pajamas 97. My name is Sandra Beasley, so I will definitely see about some of the tech stuff, but for now I can already get the update that some of you all are tuned in, and I'm really delighted to see you all here. I am talking to you from Southwest DC. I live a few blocks off the National Mall, and all of the poems that I will be sharing with you tonight are from my collection Made to Explode, which will be out in February of next year with W.W. Norton. With any luck, we will have my cat, Sal, hear the background noise and come in to investigate. If so, I'll do the obligatory opportunity for a pet cameo. But in the meantime, it's just you all and me and my pajamas, which you may recognize from cameo appearances in photos of things I cook at home. So just to give folks an overview of how this is going to go, I've got 5 poems tonight. I haven't quite flipped over to a script, but I do have a script that some folks have for accessibility purposes. I'm also happy to provide full text of any of the poems after the fact. And let's see, I'm seeing 10 sets of eyes. So I think without further ado, we're just going to get going. There will be a chance at the end for questions. I'll be able to read those automatically scrolling up, so please don't hesitate to chime in if you have things that you'd like me to discuss further. But without further ado, Poets in Pajamas 97 with Sandra Beasley. All right, so let's get started. I know it's on folks' mind. We've had a loss to our community. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away coming into this weekend. And I know that folks have really strong feelings about that. There have been scenes of group mourning, but also celebration of her legacy. Again, just blocks from where I live, up on the steps of the Capitol. I thought I would read a poem that first appeared on a website, a journal called The Mackinac, or The Mackinac, now that I think about it. But it's also in this anthology, Women of Resistance. And one thing that I always mention about living in DC is that things that anywhere else in the country would be metaphorical, kind of symbols and engagements with kind of abstract rhetorical ideas of patriotism, which we all know is a fraught concept, have usually quite a literal reality in DC. So the premise of this poem is in part realizing one night that the speaker of the poem is literally under the same roof as a Supreme Court justice, watching a show. For better or for worse, the show in question is Kiss Me, Kate. Kiss me. Ruth Bader Ginsburg sits in the 19th row of my heart, while on stage a woman has been conscribed to the shape of a shrew. The actress has 40-carat eyes, an aquiline nose, her shoulders slight, her waist small enough. She is spanked over our hero's knee. Everyone is laughing except the conductor, who must steady his baton, and the house manager, who's seen it all before, and the actors directed instead to be aghast, agape, gawking, agog, whatever Cole Porter rhymes with dismayed, and Ginsburg, who adjusts the pearl clipped to her ear. She curls the program in her lap. This is tiring, attending the theaters of the heart. She doesn't relish it as Sandra Day O'Connor did, sipping Prosecco at the intermission of Porgy and Bess, the gangster's soft shoe reminding us to brush up on our Shakespeare. The actress sings, I am ashamed that women are so simple. Soon, Kate will be tamed. That's how we know the ending is happy. there's a little bit of a delay between what you all write and what I see, although so far I'm seeing some responses from people that I really appreciate. It would mean the world to me if, just for the tech sakes, if someone at some point would maybe just type in, "We can hear you," so that I don't later realize I was just boldly performing my poems silently forward. But for now, I'm going to keep going and hope for the best. All right, so if you are following along on the transcript, this is the top of page 2. So that poem that I just read, as well as the next two, will be part of a suite of prose poems that are going to be in the forthcoming book I mentioned, Made to Explode, which will be out with W.W. Norton in February of next year. The book includes a number of reckonings with both American history and personal cultural inheritance. So I've got a series of poems that use midnight in the title. Jefferson Midnight, Lincoln Midnight, and with each one it's the idea of surveying our national monuments and memorials within that dramatic context, picturing someone surveying them in the midnight hour, standing or sitting or surveying and considering what has been emphasized at those monuments and memorials and what has been left out. Jefferson, Midnight. In another version of this story, he's a naturalist who dabbled in politics. He reinvented the plow. He joined the American Philosophical Society's Bone Committee, and while trying to prove the great Western lion, gave us our first giant sloth. He shipped a rotting moose to France to demonstrate the greatness of our mammals. He is a father of paleontology who didn't believe extinction was part of God's plan. He asked Lewis and Clark, should they encounter the mammoth, to capture one. For months, his seawall has been sinking, the Potomac's mudflats sucking at support timbers. In 1918, and for 6 summers after, the tidal basin was chlorinated, so this bank could become a beach, whites only. Spiders who are drawn to rising heat populate the ceilings of Jefferson's memorial. Once the sun sets, the temperature drops. They lose their grip and fall. Bodies bounce off my shoulders. Bodies land in my hair. Guards call this the spider rain. I have always appreciated the ability to take visitors to the city around in the middle of the night to show them these monuments and memorials, which, if you live here, you know they're open 24/7, 7 days a week. However, I'll mention that the FDR Memorial, which has usually been one of my favorite ones to visit, I took poet and disability activist Jillian Weisse there back in summer of 2019. And what we found was the water turned off, a number of light bulbs burned out that hadn't been replaced. There have been so many signs of things going very wrong in DC, but for some reason that one stayed with me. But I also found myself noticing all the ways that with our country's opportunity to celebrate a disabled president, we had in many ways compromised thinking about that. FDR's story fit to a particular arc. Roosevelt, Midnight. The depression here is a crash of water. Terraced flow narrates the TVA Dam. Carnelian granite erupts to blocks naked in their etched enjambments. I hate war. A man leans into his radio. The breadline waits in bronze. Eleanor stands in her resolute suit to address the United Nations. Everywhere, his words. Missing her words. Missing Lucy Mercer. Missing FDR's cigarette, clenched at a rakish angle. For his version of his story, head to 9th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest and look for a block the size of a desk with in memory of and the years of his birth and his death. That's his version. This version is an amusement park The memorial opened, and 4 years later, they added a wheelchair. The stone is beautiful when snow falls. The stone is beautiful when the cherry blossoms accumulate, wind swept. This sculpted wall is supposed to speak of WPA, CCC, the alphabet agencies, but its braille dots are oversized beyond any one fingertip. This is gibberish, a visitor says, feeling the spaces between. I'm also a disabled writer, although I was well into my adulthood before I knew to claim and embrace that identity. And one of the reasons I was so excited to take part in the Poets in Pajamas series was because of the relative scarcity in previous years of readings that could be participated in from home. That's changed in recent months, of course. I know that a lot of us are experiencing Zoom fatigue, and so I'm doubly appreciative of anyone choosing to spend their time here this evening. At the same time, I feel like it's important to note that so many kin are still being left out of a conversation. We are using platforms that do not have great captioning, do not have the embedding of interpreters, do not trust YouTube's auto captioning, and I know that in a lot of scenarios we're still prioritizing the non-disabled experience. So I want to accept responsibility for that, say that what I can do tonight is offer these transcripts, these texts, and know that I am actively pledging, I'm actively working and fighting event by event to create better and more inclusive spaces. As referenced in the next poem, I'm kind of fed up with the way that organizations, not things like this where folks are doing the best they can out of their own time and money, but organizations receiving grants, taking membership fees on this premise of ADA compliance and inclusivity, and then telling us they can't afford universal design. So this next poem, some of you will know the organization it's angled at. It is called Customer Service Is. We take pride in serving the. We're accustomed to servicing the. Please take the attached. Please answer these 6. Please answer these 8. This will only be a quick. If microphones don't reach, then. If ramps are required, then. If you need audio, then. If you need visual, then. We request 1 week's. We request 1 month's. All reasonable requests will. A flock of surveys is a surveillance. A stampede of stairs is an architecture. An expectation of elevators is a favor. An oh crap of crips is a caucus. But I have an aunt who is. I had a friend who was. We practice best. We follow the. You have to see our. You have to stand up for. Your help is so. Your answers will be. So my particular disability consists of life-threatening and pervasive allergies that include dairy, eggs, some tree nuts, and shrimp. If I'm smiling oddly, I'm just going to go off my script for a moment and say that one thing I've not had to deal with in the last 6 months is allergic reactions in public spaces. It has been a strange relief. I've gotten used to the ways that food, which is often used, usually used as an invitation to include, sharing a wedding cake, for example, sharing a birthday cake. It can often serve to exclude me personally from a gathering. But I live well, and I eat well, and I am exactly who I am, and I would not opt to be cured of my allergies, even if you gave me the option. I cannot tell you how many times I've been approached under the guise of, you're gonna find this really interesting, only to be presented with a story or a movie or a joke that makes a spectacle of allergic reaction. as if I'd be amused by the weaponization of my body. So this is a poem that first appeared in the New York Times, thanks to Gillian Weisse and Khadijah Queen. It's called Death by Chocolate. A man wants my take on his novel, where a wife dies with a peanut in her mouth after we've met her husband in the act with his secretary in the passenger seat of a late life convertible. A man wants my take on his novel, where the husband's marital issues are solved by her anaphylactic collapse after he serves her takeout spiked with a cashew, and for another 300 pages he wonders, was it an accident or did I know? Somewhere out there, a man is writing a novel about a chef with a taste for adding shrimp paste to curry and his unsuspecting shellfish allergic wife, and I will be asked for my take on it. I have been offered dozens of takes on my own death. Suggestions abound. Death by ice cream, death by cake, death by cucumber, though that would take a while. Perhaps gazpacho as a shortcut. Death by mango, death by Spanish omelet, death by dairy. An abstraction sexy to someone who has never had the side-eye, cream brought out slopping toward the coffee, who has never felt histamine's palm at her throat, who says to me, cheese makes life worth living. These wives, I get you, women who did not grow up aspiring to be a plot device. We almost die a lot, or we die a lot. Almost. We're over it. Our mouths have more to say. So I'm going to pause there. I was asked to leave a little bit of time for the possibility of questions, and so I'm going to kind of, be quiet, my laptop. So I'm going to kind of pay attention to the scrolling, and if anyone wants to chime in with something, well, I know there's a little bit of a delay, so I'm just going to start by talking a little bit more about Made to Explode. This was a tough collection for me, although it started from a really joyous place. I was editing an anthology called Vinegar and Char, verse from the Southern Foodways Alliance, and it is all poems that engage Southern eating traditions. And one thing that happens when you're editing other people's poems about food is that you find yourself writing your own poems about food. In my case, I wanted to write about boiled peanuts, for example, and also cheaper foods, pre-made foods, tater tots, things that were reflective of my experience where, not everyone's grandmother had the acumen or the time to spend all day putting together a stew. To write about food invariably led me back towards writing about history. To write about history meant that I found myself thinking about the inheritances of the culture of where I grew up. I grew up in Virginia. I've now lived in DC almost the same number of years as I lived in Virginia. It's a very specific mid-Atlantic culture with some great things about it and some not great things. As I kind of was examining with that Jefferson Midnight, I both went to a high school and a college dedicated to Thomas Jefferson, someone whose shadow I now have extremely mixed feelings about. And so I was just, with these poems, really trying to both celebrate my culture, but also interrogate it. And that is a very balancing challenge, as any of you, I think, could probably attest to if you've tried doing it in your own work. I'm going to actually, it's going to look weird, I'm going to be touching the screen, because since I had to do a last-minute flip to working off my phone, I didn't get to set up a dynamic for me to see if anyone wrote in with questions. So the book has 4 sections, which is the first time I've tried organizing a book with that much. It's a lot of material. There's one sestina. I have a sestina about DC street names and DC history. There are poems intersecting with my grandparents' generation. My grandfather was associated with the medical care for some of the early NASA folks, including some of the Project Mercury missions. So, you know, this kind of cauldron, this melting pot of American history, again, personal stories and political stories. All right, so I'm looking to see, we've got about 10 minutes, and I'm hoping that I might see a question pop up through the comments, but if I don't see one, what I might do is just read maybe one other poem. Maybe I'll read that Sestina if I can dig it up. And again, I'm just really appreciative of everyone's time and their energy. Yeah, I'm gonna do this. So I'm gonna read a poem that is called American Rome. You're hearing rustling noises because I'm pulling out the packet of poems, the hard copies. Obviously, I didn't have time to circulate this poem in advance, but if you can go to the Academy of American Poets website, so Sandra Beasley, American Rome, it is on poets.org, so you can bring up that text for access purposes, and it is something that I would share with the organizers later. Oh, good. Okay, Annie's got a question, and now, all right, so I'm going to take a couple of questions and then close with that if that ends up being something we have time for. Annie's asking about writing process. So I think that I'm a fairly gradual writer who is very much in love with the process of revision. I go through long periods where I don't draft, and then when I do draft, it tends to be in very intense spurts. In fact, some of my previous books, like Was the Jukebox, were written very much out of a poem a day process, which is something I always like to credit to my friend and fellow poet Maureen Thorson, who organized it as NaPoWriMo. And I like those kind of intense bursts where I fall in love with reading a poem aloud. I fall in love with holding it in my mind and in my mouth and just constantly tweaking individual lines. I will often, as part of my revision process, take out all of my line breaks and re-break it from scratch. In my teaching, I talk about targeted revision, which means not sitting down each time and thinking, I just got to make it better, but instead thinking like today I'm just going to think about verb tenses, or in another session today I'm just going to think about imagery. So I try to kind of divide and conquer. And the last thing I'll say about process is that I am drawn to forms that employ strategy. So previously that's been mostly shown through the Sestina, but I also have 2 golden shovels. And in the new collection, both those golden shovels, which is a tribute to the work of Gwendolyn Brooks, uses an entire Gwendolyn Brooks poem as the framing text. So they're long poems. I think the one that is based on the sonnet Gay Chaps at the Bar runs a full 100 lines. So let me loop back a little bit. Elizabeth Lindsay Rogers has asked about DC's identity, whether it feels like a Southern place. It does for me. I don't know if that's because I carry it up with me, but one thing that I love is there's a tradition of people who come up from the South, try to go further north, and then are like, nuh-uh, and they come back to DC and they stay there. I think of that with Sam Gilliam coming up from Mississippi, the visual artist, trying to go up to New York and realizing no, but whereas DC proved to be a place that he could call home. I find in our kindnesses and our general camaraderie of speech towards each other, DC, which I really think of in terms of locals. I think of it as the people who come and stay. I love the permeability of our diplomatic community, and I'm really open to the sense of service that often brings people who come here for rotations, but I love the people who stay. And so that too, to me, feels like a Southern thing, that openness to grabbing hold of people and hoping they join with you in community. I also really love grits. My husband makes excellent savory ones, so I'd like to hope that on the mornings we're eating either grits or lima beans within sight of the Capitol, I'm at least reinforcing a little bit of Southernness. I do think that I'm getting comments on my pajamas. Yay! I'm getting comments on the possibilities of moving if the election does not go as I think many of us agree it needs to. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to spend 3 months in Ireland early last year. It was maybe a necessary break from DC life. It's a terrific country for poetry. I highly recommend it. And it was really funny because one thing I'll mention is that the poems I wrote there were different. They were different in texture from the poems I was writing here. And I think they were a little longer, a little almost woollier. I don't know if that's definitely not a technical term. But I was able to continue working through the themes of elegies for my grandparents' generation, but they went a little different. And one of those poems, if you end up reading Made to Explode, is it's actually riffing on Roland Barthes, and it's a poem that is very much thinking about photographs, the photographs we carry of our grandparents and how we try to remember them that way. In terms of current events kind of permeating into the poems, yeah. I mean, I think that we all want to be mindful that it is a time for self-interrogation. It is not a time to take easy platitudes for granted. This is not maybe what the question was intending, but I think that part of my responsibility in revisiting my own work is to recognize mistakes I made earlier, to think about things that if I could rewrite those poems from my first book or my second book, I would write them differently. And I think it's okay to own that and discuss that. And it also means that even now I'm trying to be a really active interrogator. As I was reading the poems, I switched out. There was one moment where I saw on the written text, it was, I see you, and I changed it to I get you, because I'm really trying to strip out using the metaphors of seeing and hearing as being contingent to understanding, because it suggests that those who are blind or those who are deaf somehow are cut off from understanding, but that's somehow that somehow to be blind is to be unaware of or out of touch with, and I want to resist that. So I think on every possible level, in a time when we are all taking great care with our language and understanding its power, it's changing who I am as a poet, and I'm really game for that. There's a question, what's my name? Yes, my name's Sandra Beasley. This is Poets in Pajamas 97. If I had been able to figure out the technology to change the event name proper, that would have been the first thing I did. But thank you all. I'm always joking with my students. I'm at that funny age. I never felt ancient technologically, but right now with my ring light and my Facebook Live impromptu and my last minute, browser switching, I'm realizing, oh my gosh, but I'd like to think that I'm getting better as well as older. All right, we've got just a minute or two left. I'm really mindful of people's time. I think what I'll do is, since that poem I mentioned is a long one, I'm going to switch and read a different Academy of American Poets poem, which is a poem called Say the Word. I think that would be a great closing. So again, if you need an accessible text, I will make one available afterwards, but I also want to steer people to poets.org. If you search for my name and you search for the phrase Say the Word, it will come up, and I will read that poem now. And I just want to thank, again, I really want to thank the organizers of the of Poets in Pajamas. I think it's an incredible initiative. I'm so grateful to the other poets I've gotten to tune in and listen to, and I'm really grateful for y'all's time tonight. All right, almost there. Here we go. Meg Day, who's a terrific poet, was kind enough to curate this poem as part of their time editing the series for Poem a Day. Say the word. To be apart, I'm told. To be asunder. To be a privative, negative, reversing force. To be reached only by oaths and curses. To have black sheep sacrificed in my name because I'm a god, yes, as we are all gods on occasion. To be bodied as I am bodied, to be rich of earth, which is to be chronically chthonic, to be where the gems are, underground, to be dis, to be dis, to be dis, to reject any pickaxe disguised as love. All right, again, I am so grateful to this audience and to the organizers, and I'm just going to, oh, thank you. Annie's pointing out in the comments that you can request accessible documents now or after the fact. We will add that poem text, and y'all are wonderful. This really lifts my heart to spend this time with you tonight. So I'm gonna go ahead and tap the finish, and I hope to cross paths with you all, whether online or in person or through the pages of a book. Take care, please.